Hi all, I have an interesting Magnus Carlsen game to show you against Anish Giri. Magnus Carlsen playing black. This is from the Gashimov Memorial, round 8. So c4, the English opening, e5, we go into a 4 knights, English 4 knights variation, g3, d5, c takes, knight takes, bishop g2. And now the knight goes back to b6 here, because knight takes e5 might have been a concern. For example, if bishop e7, knight takes e5 is a good tactical shot, it seems. After knight takes c3, bishop takes c6 check. For example, this position is going to be giving white a big advantage. So the knight safely goes back away from the fire of the bishop. White castles, bishop e7, a3, as though b4 is coming next, and black clamps down on that with a5. d3, black castles, bishop e3, bishop e6, rook c1. a4, fixing down against b4, but this pawn is potentially vulnerable. It's already able to be captured by taking here first and taking on a4. But this is delayed. White actually plays knight d2. If we have a look at this, why wasn't it won immediately here? Let's have a look. This kind of gambit that's being played here. Bishop takes, knight takes. It seems here e4 is dangerous, because if takes, then we can take the queen off and then take the knight. So this e4 break here is pretty dangerous. For example, if knight e1, e3, f takes, and there's a lot of disruption here after bishop g5. So this is going to be at least fine for black. If white has to do something like sack the exchange, it's fine. So anyway, so this is delayed, knight d2. This pawn isn't won yet. It's after f5 is played, though, that this is now played. Bishop takes b6 and knight takes a4. But still, there's some dark square counterplay on its way, because white has invested that dark square bishop. So black's got the dark square bishop without a counterpart. Knight c3 and now e4. So this pawn is pinned to the knight now. Can't take because of queen takes d2 or bishop takes d2. So we have king h1. Queen d7, trying to build pressure on that d file, but also perhaps the queen can switch for an attack. Rook b1, rook a d8, building the pressure on the d file. Knight c4, queen f7, threatening bishop takes f7, bishop takes c4 rather now with that pin. b3 reinforcing the c4 knight. e takes, f4 sort of piercing the dark squares of the white position. White plays knight e4. Here, there's various alternatives to check out. Pardon me. Okay, let's have a look at a few alternatives. This is a critical position. If f3, queen g6, and this is quite nice for black. For example, g4, rook takes d3 is very nice for black. It's very, very tricky. Now let's have a look at also if knight e4, okay, on knight e4, bishop e7 was played. G takes. If something like rook c1, then f3. That's very, very nice for black. So g takes, queen takes, a4. Here, actually, if the move f3, then b5, kicking that knight, and then black can actually consider taking on a3, which is nice for black. So a4 fixes down against b5, secures that a3 pawn, but the b4 square is given away. Knight b4, queen e2, queen h6. Here, if knight takes d3, white could play this, rook bd1, and after this is actually going to be an even position that hits the bishop. White's actually okay there. Okay, so let's see. So queen e2, queen h6, rook bd1, knight d5, rook g1, king h8, bishop f1, rook f4, as though rook h4 is a major threat now. Knight e5, rook doubles now, the rooks double. We have some alternatives here though, which could have been considered as well as this doubling. Rook h4 immediately, knight f3 for example, bishop g4. This position is very nice for black. Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. So, you know, rook h4 is pretty direct as well as doubling. But doubling is a very natural move, doubling the rooks. As an alternative to knight f3 here, if f3, then knight e3, for example, this position, queen f4, rook takes d3 is possible because the queen's overloaded trying to protect h2. Knight takes f1. Rook takes f3. Again, the queen's overloaded. So this shows there's some mileage in the variations, it seems, where black just goes in for the kill with rook h4. So anyway, let's go back to the game. So just doubling the rooks. f3. We have now rook h4 now. d4. Knight f4. Queen moves. Bishop takes b3, rook b1, bishop takes a4, so black is getting some pawns here. Bishop takes, rook takes, queen e6. The white king is slightly shaky. Look at the white pawn structure. It's kind of isolated pawns here, and the king's going to be potentially more insecure than the black king as a result. But it needs some exchanges here to clear the way to emphasize white's weaknesses. We have queen b2, bishop d8, knight g5, and the queen drops back. It keeps an eye on the center file as well as h5 here. Rook b3, and now some simplification which does emphasize the vacuum of weaknesses in white's position and the more isolated pawn structure. Knight e6 immediately putting pressure on d4 now. Rook g4 and more simplification, but even though this seems to repair in some way the pawn structure, there's holes left behind and weaknesses. There's a vacuum of weaknesses, and there's a very elegant move here played by Magnus Carlsen. Can you spot it if I give you 5 seconds? Okay, queen d8, which puts pressure on d4 but also supports queen d5. You can see that all of a sudden there's loads of weaknesses around white's king. The black king is securer now. We have rook h3, queen d5 check. On queen takes d4, queen takes, knight takes, there's knight g6 check. So that's no good for black. So queen d5 check, king g1, queen e4 with lots of threats now. Lots of threats covering g6 against knight g6. So there's knight takes d4, for example, or queen e1. Queen b4 protects e1 and holds the rook there. So there's no knight takes d4. But Magnus plays rook f6, getting the rook out of danger. And so all the threats are now on the cards. Well, knight takes d4 is on the cards, for example. White actually gave up here. He resigned. Let's have a look what happens here. If rook f3, trying to sort of get to f8 tactically, rook takes, knight takes, queen takes, yeah. Actually, so that doesn't matter, rook f3 particularly. If rook g3, knight takes d4 is now possible. h4, knight e2 check, rook f2 check, and knight f4 checkmate as an example. So yeah, it's pretty horrendous here in this position after rook f6. This is just too much, this position with knight takes d4 on the cards. If something like rook d3, I think something like queen f4 is dangerous, or knight f4. In fact, knight f4 looks really, really dangerous. If the rook moves now, then there's knight h3 here. That's pretty nasty in checkmate, in fact. So it just seems as though, because of the weaknesses around white's king, this is an untenable position. The more we look at this, the more we can appreciate that now. It's an untenable position. So it seems earlier, the fragmented pawns and the plus on top of that, the simplification led to quite a lot of relative vacuum around the king compared to black's king. Anyway, I hope you got something out of it. This, and also I invite you to check out the PGN link I'll put in the description and in the comments of this video. We at Chessworld have put structured PGN now, so you can see nice indentation for the analysis used of variations within this video. So it's more easy to follow that in a separate window along with playing the video, which I invite you to check out. Okay, so kind of very nicely formatted indented PGN is available for this game. So check the comment for that. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.